everyone, it's Sandra and I'm out here with Gus. This bin was originally all European nightcrawlers. I've recently introduced some compost, so I think I'm pretty much going to have some red wigglers in there from now on. I've been setting up this bin for a harvest. You can sort of see the line in the sand there. This is the end of the bin. I'm trying to clear out big chunks anyway. And by doing so, by feeding in this end, I've been trying to encourage the worms to come to this end. Let's see how we're doing. And I've got a little bit of a different surprise for the worms. I'm going to bait them out using a bird's nest. So let's turn this material over and see how I'm doing in getting the big chunks out of here and attracting all the worms to this end. Because they've eaten all through their newspaper, I had to go looking for another sheet of newspaper to put down here so that I don't mix up the end that I'm trying to harvest with the end that's going to remain in the bin. All right, so everything I turn over here then, I'm just looking to make sure that I've done a good job of getting most of the big chunky bits out and making sure that I don't have a huge worm population hanging out in here. Well, I'm going to bait them out one more time. But look at this material that I'm going to be pulling out. Now, somebody said to me once, big bits I'm just going to throw behind here. Somebody said to me once that the castings from Euros, I mean, they're bigger. I mean, the Euro is a close cousin of the red wiggler. In fact, they've renamed it Eisenia hortensis, so that it is in the same family as the red wiggler. But I don't know. Do you notice the difference in the size of the little granules of the castings? If you have Euros versus red wigglers, let me know down in the comments if you have both and you notice a substantive difference in the castings. So I'm just taking out the odd twig and everything, putting it in the end that's going to stay in the bin. These castings are pretty dense down the bottom. I see a roly-poly still making his way in this end, which is great because these big bits that do remain behind, I want the roly-polies to keep working on them. Remember, the roly-polies deposit poop, of course, as they crawl along and chew up these sticks and whatnot. And it's their poop that they deposit all through the material then that really causes an explosion in the microbe population, because the microbes are attracted to the poop. And then the microbes then can work away on this material and the worms can get into it more easily. So it's a really full circle, a symbiotic relationship that they all work together to turn this into something your plants are going to love. And turning it over like that, I see a few cocoons in there. That's okay. I'm going to age these castings out. So that looks pretty good. Let me just flip this newspaper over and we'll turn over the old feeding zone and just see how it's doing to attract my worm population. Oh my goodness, it's dense. My fingers don't even want to go down through this material. All right. I want to turn it over onto the newspaper. Of course, that means some of the worms are going to probably crawl around. There's a roly-poly crawling around. Some of the worms are probably going to crawl around and try to escape on me out into the end that I want to harvest next time. That's okay. If the worms do end up over here, they'll do red rover. They, I hope, will come over once I set the baiting operation up. So this, there is an old piece of newspaper down there. I'm just, by lifting it up and letting the pieces separate, I'm introducing some air, which is necessary for the worms as well. See these big sticks? You know, the sticks are carbon, of course, but they are not available to the worms until, like I said, the roly-polies chew them up, deposit their poop, because they're going to also break the wood up into smaller pieces. So those two actions are going to allow these wood chunks to break down. But you see the worms are in this zone, which is what I want. What I will do when I do the baiting operation is I also will shake out the more finished castings from this end so that what remains in the bin is simply the big chunks and the unfinished bedding from the bird's nest. I don't know whether they'll finish it up in short order. So there's some euros there just hanging out, having a good time. Just this one last corner before I give them their bird's nest baiting. Don't want to tip it out over the side. Yep, there's the worms happily in there. My goodness, they've produced a lot of castings, which is great. That means that that line that I said, dividing the end of the bin that I pull out versus the end of the bin that I leave in, is moving more and more towards this end, meaning I get more and more castings out. So running my hand flat along the bottom and lifting up. There you go, just to get some really nice air into that pocket, and that will speed the processing up. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just put the biggest of those bits right tight along as far as I can, tight along this wall, and leave the more finished castings on this end that's going to be pulled out next time. And we're going to put our bird's nest in. Now, what is a bird's nest made out of? Well, I love the fact that it's, first of all, it's from last spring, so it's aged quite a few months, probably 6 months. And so the birds were around collecting the fine leaf stems and grasses. And there's a special surprise in this bird's nest that I'm going to show you in a few minutes. Just let me get these chunky bits out. Okay, is that enough chunky bits? Yeah, I think that's enough chunky bits. Before I add my bird's nest on top of them, I'm going to make like a nest for my nest. Okay, let me show you this bird's nest. Now I've got it in a container and I'm going to take it out of the container. But you see in the center of the bird's nest, our bird's nests in our yard always end up like this. This is a layer of our dog's hair. We've always had golden retrievers, and Flash is half and half, yellow lab and golden retriever. And look at the dog's hair that the birds line their nests with. Always happens in our yards. And I just think of the little birds growing up in that lovely downy retriever hair. How special. So we're going to see if the worms will eat it. There we go. Now, to make this yummy for the worms, I'm going to put some extra yucky material in there. This is actually honeydew and cantaloupe rind that's being pulverized with some eggshell grit along for pH and just for the grit for their crop and their gizzard. So I'm just kind of smushing the melon rinds, and they are also moldy, as you can see, because I've sat them out at room temperature after being frozen for a few days. So they are moldy, juicy, and I'm actually going to make it extra special by actually pouring some of that juice in here. Not going to give it all. There you are. So what a juicy mud puddle for the worms. I want to build up a little bit of bedding in here because this is the end that's going to stay. So there's some of my musty, aging leaves. So they've been modestly moist over the late summer. So they are not fresh from the lawn. I've probably had them in a bucket with some water for about a month and a half. So they're going to form a lovely bedding spot as I pull out these castings, hopefully the next time. If I time it right, won't it be great to see the these euros, playing in that egg's nest? So, like I said, I've got a few other big bits in here, you know, probably that need to come over, but let me just lift up this newspaper. Oh, there we go. And just if I see any big chunks, they'll come over. But I think I've done a fairly good job of pulling the most of the chunky bits back over onto this side. Of course, I'll do it one more time when I actually pull the castings. But look at how many new castings were built up on this side Like I said, the roly-polies, I saw them active in this zone. And now I've dumped the worms into this zone. So they're going to play the red rover. And they're going to crawl back towards this yummy bird's nest. And in crawling through, they will aerate this side and they will process it, that extra little bit on their way over. Okay, that is Gus baited up and ready to go. I'm so excited to see what the worms are going to do with that bird's nest, how quickly they will process it. Like I said, got to find anything to make the worms have a diverse diet as possible. And just because I've used this newspaper, I'm going to darken the baiting zone. Always a good idea to darken your baiting zones to make it that much more attractive to worms, because it's bubble wrap. They can see through it. And they prefer to hang out where it's nice and dark. All right, everyone, come back to see the bird's nest baiting operation to see if it's successful. Bye for now.